I was standing in the kitchen, staring blankly at the stack of bills on the counter when my phone buzzed. I glanced at it. Sarah. I hadn't heard from her in over a week. I picked it up and swiped to answer, but before I could even say hello, her voice hit me like a slap across the face. I heard you've been telling people I'm lazy, that I'm just using you. Is that true? I froze. It felt like the whole room shifted. This wasn't Sarah, my best friend for over 10 years, the one I'd taken in when she'd lost her job, her apartment, everything. The one I'd spent nights talking to about everything under the sun, our dreams, our fears, the future. This wasn't the person I knew, and the accusation didn't make sense. I didn't know how to respond at first. Sarah, what are you talking about? I've never said anything like that to anyone. Where's this coming from? She cut me off. I'm not dumb. People are talking, and I know you're the one starting all of it. Everyone knows how much I've struggled, but you're the one who's been making it look like I'm a burden to you. You know what? Maybe I am a burden. Her voice trembled with anger, but I could hear the hurt too. That was the thing with Sarah. When she got angry, she always mixed it with this deep, sharp vulnerability that made you feel like you just stepped on something fragile. My heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't the Sarah I'd supported for the past year. This was someone I didn't recognize. I'm not saying you're a burden, Sarah. You're my friend. I took you in when no one else would, and I've been doing everything I can to help you get back on your feet. My voice wavered a little, but I wasn't going to let her twist this on me. I don't need your help anymore, she snapped. Maybe I should have never moved in with you. Maybe it was a mistake. My throat tightened. It felt like she had just slapped me with those words. I had spent months trying to help her, taking care of the rent when she couldn't pay it, cooking meals for both of us, offering emotional support when she'd been down, taking on so much extra stress just to make sure she didn't feel like she was alone. Now, all of that seemed meaningless to her, like it never mattered. What do you mean? You're not saying you're leaving, right? We're friends, Sarah. This isn't about just moving out. We've been through too much for you to throw everything away like this. A long silence stretched between us, and in that silence, I could hear the thumping of my heart. I wanted to reach out to her, tell her I didn't understand, but I also didn't want to sound desperate. I wasn't going to beg for her to stay. But then she spoke again, her words so cold I almost didn't recognize them. You're controlling, okay? That's the real problem. You act like everything you do is for me, but you're the one pulling the strings. You think you're helping, but you're just trying to keep me in debt to you, to make sure I need you. And I can't keep living like that. The blood drained from my face. What? Are you serious? You think I'm manipulating you? I've been trying to help you, Sarah. I've been trying to give you a place to get back on your feet. I didn't ask for anything in return. I didn't expect. Exactly. She interrupted, her voice rising. You didn't expect anything, and that's the problem. You don't think I see it? You act like you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart, but every little thing you do is a reminder that I owe you. You think that just because I'm living here, I'm automatically in debt to you. That hit harder than anything she'd said before. A knot formed in my chest, and for the first time, I realized how differently she had been viewing everything. I had always thought I was doing the right thing, but now, hearing her words, I wasn't so sure anymore. Sarah, I didn't want to make you feel like that. I swear, I didn't. I was just trying to help. I was trying to give you space to breathe. She let out a bitter laugh, though it sounded more like a sob than anything else. Space? You think I had space? All you've done is smother me. I need my own life. I don't need you playing the hero, acting like you're the one who gets to decide what's best for me. Fine, I said, my voice shaking. If that's how you really feel, then what do you want from me? Do you want me to kick you out? Because I won't do that, but I can't keep doing this either. I don't know what I want anymore, she muttered. I don't even know who I am anymore. I could hear her breathing, heavy and jagged, like she was holding back tears. And that broke me. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But instead, I swallowed the lump in my throat and said quietly, So, what now? I don't know, she replied, the words trailing off as if she were thinking them through for the first time. Maybe I just need some time. I can't be here anymore. I have to go. The line went silent as she hung up. I stared at the screen of my phone, not knowing what to do, where to go from here. My best friend, the person I'd done everything for, was gone, and in her place was someone who seemed like a stranger. It didn't make sense. I didn't know how to process what had just happened, but I knew one thing for sure. Everything was about to change, and I had no idea how to fix it. I didn't hear from Sarah for 3 days after that conversation, and in those 3 days, I felt like I was walking through a fog, my thoughts trapped in an endless loop. I kept replaying our conversation, trying to find anything that might explain what had gone wrong. I had been patient with her, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I was giving her space to make her own decisions. I never tried to control her, at least not in the way she was describing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was going on. Something that I wasn't seeing. On the fourth day, I got a call from Anna. I knew what she was going to say before she even spoke. You won't believe this, but I just saw Sarah. She's staying at Dan's now. She moved in with him. I was stunned. I didn't even know what to say. Dan? Her ex-boyfriend? The guy she had broken up with months ago because she said he was too controlling? The guy who had left her in the middle of a financial mess, the same mess I'd been helping her with? The same guy I had warned her not to go back to? Are you sure? I managed to say. I thought she was supposed to be sorting things out on her own. Anna sighed. She said she didn't want to be a burden on you anymore. I'm not sure, but it sounds like she's just running away from the whole situation. I don't think she wants to deal with the consequences of her actions. And now she's with him, just like nothing ever happened. I felt the familiar anger bubbling up inside me, but it was different this time. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was confusion, frustration, and, for the first time, fear. I had been there for Sarah, tried my best to help her. And now she was throwing it all away to go back to a relationship I knew wasn't healthy for her. A relationship that had caused her nothing but pain. I don't get it, I muttered. Why would she go back to him? After everything that happened? Why would she choose him over me? Anna didn't have an answer, and neither did I. But the questions kept coming, one after another, gnawing at me. Was I really just some kind of safety net for her? Was that all I had been to Sarah? Some kind of temporary fix until she found something or someone else to fill the gap? I tried calling her again that evening, but she didn't pick up. I left a voicemail. Sarah, please, I don't understand what's going on. I'm not angry with you, but I need you to talk to me. I just want to know what happened. I thought we were better than this. I felt a lump form in my throat as I said the words. The worst part was that I wasn't even sure if I meant them anymore. The next day, I bumped into Dan at the grocery store. He looked the same, dressed in his usual, worn-out jacket, as half-lidded as though he'd never fully woken up. I hadn't spoken to him since the breakup, but now that he was back in the picture, I couldn't avoid it. You seen Sarah? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Dan didn't look surprised to see me. He probably expected this confrontation. Yeah, she's here. With me, he said, like it was a fact that needed no further explanation. I couldn't hide the disbelief in my voice. You're kidding me, right? After everything? She left you because you were manipulating her, because you were controlling her life, and now she's back? Just like that. Dan rubbed the back of his neck. I know what she told you. She told me the same thing. But you didn't know the whole story, did you? I was taken aback. What's that supposed to mean? He smirked, clearly enjoying the upper hand. You think Sarah is the only one with problems? You think she was perfect in all this? She lied to you, man. About everything. I stepped closer, not knowing whether to be furious or curious. What are you talking about? Dan didn't hesitate. Sarah came to me after all that mess. She said you were pushing her too hard, that you were making her feel like she couldn't breathe. She came back to me because she felt safe with me. She needed me. You were too much for her, and she couldn't handle it. But I wasn't the one who got in her head like you did. I felt my heart race. This wasn't just about what Sarah had told him. This was about something deeper, something I had completely missed. You're telling me that I'm the one who pushed her away? That everything I did, everything I sacrificed was somehow wrong? Dan crossed his arms, his tone patronizing. You don't get it, do you? She didn't want to be your project. She didn't want to be someone you had to fix. You didn't listen to her, man. You only heard what you wanted to hear. I was shaking now, not sure if I was angry or if I was losing my mind. Are you seriously blaming me for this? No, Dan said, with an almost tired smile. I'm just telling you what you don't want to hear. Sarah's been telling herself a lot of lies. But that's not your fault. She needs to figure things out for herself. I didn't know what to say. The words burned in my throat, but they wouldn't come out. Dan was right in some ways. I hadn't been listening. I had been so focused on fixing everything for Sarah that I never stopped to ask if she even wanted to be fixed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on. Something bigger that neither Dan nor Sarah had told me about. I walked away, my mind racing. I needed answers, but the more I tried to figure things out, the more tangled everything became. I thought I knew who Sarah was, but now I wasn't sure. I didn't know what had changed or when it had happened, but I could feel the ground shifting beneath me. Every step I took felt like I was walking further away from the person I thought I knew. As I stood there, trying to process everything, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Sarah again. I didn't want to answer. Part of me was too angry, too hurt. But I knew I had to. If I didn't, I might lose her for good. I picked it up and pressed it to my ear. "Sarah," I said, my voice breaking. Her voice came through, small and hesitant. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. But as soon as I heard those words, I realized that this conversation wasn't going to be as simple as I had hoped. There were things she hadn't told me yet, things I wasn't ready to hear. The next few days were a blur of missed calls, unread messages, and sleepless nights. Every time I tried to confront Sarah or figure out what had happened, I hit a wall. It was as though she was actively avoiding me. I started to feel like I was losing grip on everything, on her, on my own sense of reality. I had never expected it to turn out like this. All I wanted was to help her get back on her feet, and now it seemed like I was the one who was losing everything. It wasn't until I got a random message from Anna that I had any hope of finding answers. Anna had always been the calm one in our group, the person who kept her head when everyone else was losing theirs. "I think I found something you might want to know," she wrote. "Meet me at the cafe in an hour." I had no idea what she had uncovered, but I was desperate for any piece of the puzzle. I arrived at the cafe, my mind racing. Anna was already there, sitting at a corner table, her coffee untouched. She looked up when I walked in and gave me a tight smile. "You look like you've been through hell," she said, her voice soft but full of concern. I sat down across from her, trying to steady my nerves. "It's been a rough couple of days," I said. "What did you find? Is it about Sarah?" Anna hesitated for a moment before she spoke, like she was weighing the consequences of what she was about to reveal. "I've been talking to a few people, trying to piece things together. I know you've been trying to reach Sarah, but there's something you should know. Something you might not like." I felt my stomach tighten. "What is it?" "She's been hiding things from you. And not just about you, about herself. There's more to the story than what she's been telling you." I leaned forward, suddenly alert. "What do you mean? What is she hiding?" Anna took a deep breath, as if preparing to say something she wasn't sure I was ready to hear. "A few weeks ago, Sarah started seeing a therapist. She didn't tell you, right? But I know because I've been in touch with the therapist. Apparently, Sarah's been dealing with some pretty serious issues, things she didn't want to admit even to herself. It's not just about her financial situation or her relationship with Dan. She's been struggling with a lot of unresolved trauma." I blinked, trying to process what Anna was saying. "Trauma? What kind of trauma?" Anna looked around the cafe, her eyes scanning for anyone who might be listening. "It's not just one thing. It's a combination of things, a lot of stuff she never talked about with anyone. She's been through a lot of emotional abuse growing up, and it's been affecting her more than she realizes. I'm not saying this to make excuses for her actions, but it's important to understand where she's coming from. She's been carrying this weight for years, and it's been holding her back." I felt a knot tighten in my chest as the pieces began to fall into place. "So you're telling me that everything she's been doing, everything she's said, it's all because of stuff she never told me? She's been hiding this from me?" Anna nodded slowly. "Yes. And it's not just about you. She's been pushing people away for a long time. She's afraid of getting close to anyone because she doesn't want to be hurt again. That's why she's been so distant, why she's been pushing you away. But she doesn't know how to deal with it. She's been burying it all, and now it's coming to the surface in the worst way possible." I sat back in my chair, my mind reeling. Sarah had never talked to me about any of this. I had known her for years, and I had thought I understood her better than anyone else. But now I realized I hadn't known anything. She had been carrying this burden by herself, and I hadn't even known. I felt a mix of guilt and anger, guilt for not recognizing the signs sooner, and anger that she hadn't trusted me enough to let me in. "But why didn't she tell me any of this?" I asked, my voice tight with frustration. "Why didn't she open up to me?" Anna sighed. "I think she was afraid. She's been afraid of people rejecting her, of feeling like she's a burden. She doesn't know how to trust people, not even the ones she's closest to. She probably didn't want you to see her as weak or broken. And I think she's been afraid of disappointing you. She didn't want to admit that she was struggling, and so she pushed you away instead." I ran a hand through my hair, trying to process everything. So all this time, when I thought I was helping her, I was actually making it worse? Anna's eyes softened. "No, I don't think that's it. You were trying to help. But sometimes, people with unresolved trauma don't know how to accept help. They push it away because they don't feel worthy of it. It's not your fault. But it's important to understand that Sarah wasn't rejecting you on purpose. She was rejecting what she couldn't handle. She's afraid of letting anyone in because she's been hurt so many times before." I felt like I had been hit with a ton of bricks, It wasn't that I had been doing the wrong thing by helping Sarah. It was that I hadn't understood the full picture. She hadn't been rejecting me. She had been rejecting the vulnerability that came with accepting help from someone who loved her. It wasn't just about us. It was about everything she had never been able to face. I took a deep breath and let the weight of the revelation sink in. So what do I do now? I asked, feeling lost. How do I fix this? How do I help her when she's pushing me away? Anna gave me a sad smile. You don't fix it. No one can fix it except Sarah. But you can be there for her when she's ready. You have to let her come to you. Let her take the steps she needs to take on her own, but don't close the door on her. She'll need you, but it has to be on her terms. You can't push her to open up. I sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of the situation settling in. I wanted to fix everything. I wanted to make things right. But Anna was right. There was no quick fix. This wasn't something I could solve with a conversation or a gesture. This was something Sarah had to work through on her own. All I could do was be there when she was ready. As I looked up at Anna, I realized that she had given me the clarity I needed, even though it wasn't what I wanted to hear. I had to stop trying to control the situation. I had to let go. The days following my conversation with Anna felt different. I could still feel the weight of what I had learned about Sarah, but it was no longer the crushing burden it had been before. I had stopped trying to figure everything out all at once. Instead, I took a step back, focused on what I could control, and waited. There was a part of me that still wanted to reach out, to fix things, to make everything better for her, but Anna's words kept echoing in my mind. Let her come to you. I had been trying to do everything for Sarah, trying to help in every way I thought was right, but I now understood that the one thing she needed most was space. She needed to come to terms with her past before she could let anyone into her future, and that meant waiting. It didn't stop me from feeling like I was losing her, but I had to be patient. I had to trust that, if she ever got to the point where she could confront the things that had been eating away at her, she would reach out. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. It was simple. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to respond right away, to jump in with all the things I'd been holding back, questions, apologies, explanations. But I knew that wasn't the right way to approach this. Sarah wasn't asking for answers. She was asking for space to talk, for me to listen. And I had learned that I couldn't just try to fix things anymore. I took a deep breath and typed back. Of course. When? The response came almost immediately. Tomorrow, at noon. I'll come by your place. I felt my pulse quicken as the reality of the situation set in. Tomorrow. She was coming to talk. I knew that this moment had the potential to change everything between us, but I couldn't predict what would happen. Was this the moment where we finally talked about everything? Was she ready to open up? Or was this just another moment in a long string of miscommunications? The next morning felt like it was dragging on for hours. I tried to occupy my mind with things to do, cleaning the apartment, organizing a few things, but nothing seemed to make the time go faster. Every time I glanced at the clock, only a few minutes had passed. Finally, around noon, I heard a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. I stood up and opened it, and there she was, Sarah. She looked tired, but there was something different about her, something that made me pause. She wasn't the same person who had walked away from me a week ago. There was a certain vulnerability in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. She wasn't hiding behind walls anymore. Hey, she said softly, standing just outside the door. I stepped aside to let her in. Hey, it's good to see you. She nodded, her eyes flicking around the room nervously. She didn't seem sure where to begin. I don't even know where to start, she admitted, rubbing the back of her neck. I've been so messed up, and I don't know what to say to you. I don't know how to explain everything. I gestured toward the couch. Sit down. We don't have to figure everything out right now, but I need you to be honest with me. If we're going to move forward, that's the only way this is going to work. She hesitated for a moment, then sat down beside me. I've been avoiding you for a reason, she started, her voice shaky. I didn't want to hurt you, but I ended up doing it anyway. I wasn't ready to face everything that's been going on in my life, and I kept pushing you away because I didn't know how to let you in. I nodded, listening intently. I get that. But it's hard, Sarah. You've pushed me away so many times, and I thought I was helping, but I didn't understand what you were really going through. I don't want to lose you, but I don't know if I can keep doing this if you're not going to let me in. She took a deep breath, and I could see her struggling with her words, as though they were heavy and difficult to say. I know, and I'm sorry. I should have told you everything from the start, but I was so scared. I was afraid of being a burden to you, afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd leave me. I didn't want to face it myself, let alone put it on anyone else. I watched her carefully, trying to understand. The truth about what? She closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering the courage to say something she had been holding back for too long. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. When I was a kid, my family wasn't what it seemed. I've never told anyone this, not even my closest friends, but I was abused. Emotionally, physically. And I've carried that with me my whole life. It's affected every relationship I've ever had. I never knew how to deal with it, so I kept burying it, pretending like everything was fine, but it was never fine. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Sarah had never given me any indication that she was hiding something like this. I had always known that she had her issues, but this was something else entirely. I didn't want to drag you into it, she continued, her eyes filled with tears now. I didn't want to make you feel like you had to fix me. I just wanted to get my life together, and I thought if I could keep everyone at arm's length, I could manage on my own. But I was wrong. I pushed you away, and I ended up pushing everyone else away too. The silence that followed felt suffocating. I didn't know what to say. I was devastated by what Sarah had just shared with me, but I was also furious. Furious at her family, furious that she had to carry this burden alone for so long. Furious that I hadn't known. But as much as I wanted to lash out, I knew this wasn't the time for that. I reached out, gently placing my hand on hers. I'm sorry, Sarah. I had no idea. But you don't have to go through this alone anymore. I can't fix everything, but I'm here for you. I'll be here for as long as you need me. She looked up at me, her eyes full of uncertainty but also a flicker of hope. Do you mean that? After everything? Even after I hurt you? I nodded, squeezing her hand. Yeah, I mean it. For the first time in what felt like forever, we just sat there in silence, and I felt a sense of peace settle over me. We weren't okay yet. We still had a long road ahead of us. But for the first time, it felt like there was a chance for us to move forward, together. And maybe that was enough for now. The days following our conversation felt like they were both incredibly long and yet too short. There were moments when it felt like nothing had changed, like we were stuck in this perpetual limbo, where everything hung in the balance. But then there were other moments when Sarah would look at me differently or when we'd sit together in silence, and I realized that things had changed, even if we hadn't yet figured out what the new normal was. It wasn't easy, and I knew that things wouldn't be fixed overnight, but it felt like we were starting to rebuild something that had been lost. After our talk, Sarah seemed to retreat a bit. She needed space, which I understood, but that didn't make the silence any easier. She began seeing a therapist regularly, and I gave her the room to work through her issues, but I also made sure she knew I was there if she ever needed to talk. I didn't push. I didn't try to force anything. I could see her making progress, even if it was slow. There were times when she would confide in me, sharing small pieces of what she had been working on in therapy, and each time, I could tell it was a step forward, even if it was a small one. But then, one day, I got a call that I wasn't prepared for. It was from Sarah. She didn't say much at first, just that she needed to see me. Her voice sounded different, shaky in a way I hadn't heard in a while, and it immediately made me nervous. I told her to come over, and within an hour, she was sitting across from me in my living room, looking more vulnerable than I had ever seen her. I don't know how to say this, she began, looking down at her hands, twisting them together nervously. But I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how you were always there for me, even when I pushed you away. And I don't know if I deserve that, but I need to tell you something that might change everything. I could feel my heart start to race. I didn't know if she was about to apologize, or if she was going to tell me she was done, that she needed to walk away again. Whatever it is, Sarah, I said, trying to steady my voice. You can tell me. I'm not going anywhere. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw the fear in her eyes, the kind of fear that comes from facing something painful but necessary. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about letting people in, about not pushing people away. But there's a part of me that still doesn't know how to do that. There's a part of me that still doesn't know if I can. And I think that's why I've been so afraid of you getting too close. I thought if I let you in too much, I'd just drag you down with me. I didn't interrupt her. I just listened, because I knew she needed to get it out, even if it wasn't easy for her. I don't want to keep living in this cycle, she continued, her voice breaking slightly. I don't want to keep running from everything I've been through, from everything I've done. But I don't know if I'm ready to change. I'm not sure I can. And I'm afraid. I'm afraid that if I let you in too much, I'll end up pushing you away again. I don't know how to stop myself from doing that. I sat back, absorbing her words. There was a part of me that understood what she was saying, even if it was hard to hear. I knew that healing wasn't linear. I knew that even though Sarah had made progress, there would still be setbacks, and it was going to take time. A lot of time. But I also knew that I couldn't let fear control everything. I couldn't let her push me away just because she was afraid of the vulnerability that came with letting someone in. Sarah, I said softly, you don't have to have everything figured out right now. And you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to be afraid of pushing me away. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. I know it's hard, and I know you're scared, but I'm willing to wait for you. I'm not asking you to be perfect or to have all the answers. I just want you to be you, even if that means taking things one step at a time. She blinked, looking at me as though she hadn't expected me to say that. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, and then she let out a shaky breath. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can let you in without pushing you away. You don't have to let me in all at once, I said, my voice steady. I'm here for the long haul. And even if it takes time, I'll be here when you're ready. I can't promise that I have all the answers, but I do promise that I'm not going anywhere. You're not alone in this. She nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears, but this time, they were different. They weren't tears of fear or shame. They were tears of relief, tears that had been building up for a long time. Slowly, she stood up, walked over to where I was sitting, and without saying a word, wrapped her arms around me. I hugged her back, holding her tightly as if to say everything I couldn't put into words. I knew that we still had a long way to go, and there would be more tough conversations ahead, but for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like there was hope. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It wasn't a magical moment where everything was fixed and healed, but it was a step forward, a step toward healing, and sometimes that was all you could ask for. I didn't know what the future would hold for us, but I knew that as long as we were both willing to work at it, there was still a chance. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all we needed. As Sarah pulled away, her face still wet with tears but with a smile starting to form, I realized that sometimes the most important thing wasn't fixing everything in one moment, but simply being there, showing up, and staying when everything else seemed uncertain. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were finally on the right path.